Hi there, and welcome to Once Upon a Train. I'm your conductor, Michael Campbell. In the late 1940s, Walt Disney was eager to move the studio into creating live-action films. The first of these was 1950's Treasure Island. It's not at all surprising that steam locomotives would soon make an appearance as a central plot point of one of these features. The Great Locomotive Chase, released on June 6, 1956, tells the Civil War era story of the James Andrews raid, wherein Union spies captured the general locomotive more than 100 miles behind enemy lines. They ran it north, attempting to inflict as much damage as possible to Confederate railroads along the way. This Once Upon a Train tells the true story of the Andrews raid, the production of the Disney film, some rare collectibles, and where you can see the actual locomotives involved in the chase today. We've got a clean stack and clear track, so welcome aboard.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Once Upon a Train.
By spring 1862, the American Civil War was largely at an impasse, with neither side making much headway. This led to some bold ideas, including the Union destroying the Chattanooga rail line. This railroad was crucial to Confederate defense of Chattanooga. Taking that key location would sever the South's supply chains to the north, east, and west. That one victory could turn the direction of the war. James Andrews was born circa 1829 in what is now West Virginia, and later lived in Kentucky. Neither of these states would become part of the Confederacy. James was not a soldier, but a civilian who worked for the Union Army as a secret agent and smuggler of contraband. After one failed attempt to disrupt the railroad, Andrews proposed to Major General Ormsby M. Mitchell, who had really great hair, that he and a group of conspirators would seize a locomotive in Georgia. From there, they'd take it northwest to Chattanooga, where they would meet Mitchell's forces. Along the way, they destroyed much of the Western and Atlantic Railroad's infrastructure, including bridges and telegraph lines. Doing so would cut off Confederate reinforcements and supplies, allowing the Union Army to take Chattanooga and possibly bring the war to a swift end. Seeing little downside risk, Mitchell approved the plan. Although Andrews planned to start on April 11, 1862, heavy rains created a delay. On April 12, 1862, Andrews and William Campbell, no relation to me, another civilian, joined 22 volunteer soldiers from Ohio regiments at Shelbyville. Dressed as civilians and traveling in small groups, they walked about 77 miles to Chattanooga, and from there took a train to Marietta. At 5:05 a.m., they boarded another train, this one pulled by the General Locomotive. It stopped at Big Shanty, Georgia, at 5:20 a.m. to take on supplies and allow time for the passengers and crew to have breakfast at the Lacey Hotel. At 6 a.m., Andrews put the plan into action and commandeered the General more than 150 miles behind enemy lines. From there, just about everything that could go wrong did go wrong. First, they stole a regularly scheduled train. On a railroad with just a single main line, this meant they had to wait for other scheduled traffic or risk a head-on collision. Second, Andrews had to delay the operation by a day because of the rain. Unaware of this, General Mitchell kept to the plan and attacked Huntsville on schedule. This alerted Confederate forces that a siege of Chattanooga was imminent, and they began an evacuation of the city. The citizens were put aboard unscheduled southbound trains, which had the right-of-way over the railroad. This meant more delays for the northern-bound raiders. Third, they didn't count on the tenacity of William Fuller, the conductor of the now hijacked train. He and two other men chased after the raiders, first on foot, then on a handcar. The route of the Western Atlantic in this area was steep and hilly. Trains of that era generally averaged just 15 miles per hour through this terrain. Because the raiders had to pull over at passing sidings for southbound traffic, it was feasible for Fuller to catch up to them. In the pursuit, Fuller had taken successive command of 3 locomotives: the Yonah, the William R. Smith, and eventually the Texas. Fourth, it had rained for about 10 days before the mission. This soaked the wood of the bridges and trestles, making it nearly impossible to set the surprisingly well-constructed structures afire. Fifth, Andrews' crew had only one tool, a single crowbar to tear up the rail. They had little time to inflict more damage because of Fuller's dogged pursuit. Events might have turned out differently if the raiders were equipped with explosives and better tools. Lastly, like all steam engines, the General needed fuel and water to continue, neither of which was an abundant supply. It first ran out of steam just 1 mile from Big Shanty. Finally, after a chase of 89 miles in 7 hours, the General ran out of wood to burn. This enabled the pursuers to catch up just 18 miles south of Chattanooga. Andrews and his men were forced to scatter across the countryside. All were captured by Confederate soldiers within 2 weeks of the raid, tried by courts-martial, and found guilty of acts of unlawful belligerency.
James Andrews' story comes to a sad end when he is hung on June the 7th, 1862 in Atlanta. 7 additional conspirators met the same fate on June the 18th. The remaining prisoners, hoping to avoid being hung, attempted escape. Of these, 8 made their way back to Union territory, some of them aided by slaves and Northern sympathizers. The remaining 6 were exchanged for Confederate prisoners of war on March 17th, 1863.
Corporal William Pittenger, one of the surviving raiders, wrote a book about the chase in 1863. This relatively simple account was published under the title Daring and Suffering. A more detailed retelling was then published as Capturing a Locomotive in 1881. Pittenger greatly expanded the story, and this was published as The Great Locomotive Chase in 1889. These books were tremendously popular, telling an exciting tale of an event that almost ended the war in 1862. It's been claimed that in the late 19th century, virtually every U.S. household had a copy of William Pittenger's The Great Locomotive Chase, or one of its earlier titles. On March 25, 1863, Corporal Pittenger and 5 other soldiers were the first to receive the newly established Congressional Medal of Honor. Being civilians, James Andrews and William Campbell were ineligible to receive this military commendation. The excitement of a railroad chase made this story a natural fit for Hollywood. Buster Keaton produced a silent film based on the Andrews raid in 1927. Entitled The General, the movie is more of a comedy than a documentary and makes many departures from the historical record. In 1952, Wilbur Kurtz pitched to Walt Disney Productions the idea for a movie based on Pittenger's book. Kurtz was uniquely positioned to do so. He had married William Fuller's daughter, Nina, and had personally interviewed 6 of the raiders. His Civil War knowledge earned his role as a technical advisor in Hollywood, including on the 1939 epic film Gone with the Wind. But why would Disney want to make William Pittenger's story into a feature film? To provide this answer, we turn to your host, Walt Disney.
Then I ran across the book in the family library called The Great Locomotive Chase by William Pittenger. This was an eyewitness account, too. A Civil War story that did full justice to both sides. What's more, this story was about spies and trains. I've always been fascinated by locomotives. The older, the better. Down at Disneyland, we have the Santa Fe Disneyland Railroad, a 5/8 scale model after early Santa Fe trains. The engines very much like these famous Civil War engines, the Texas and the General. I guess it was inevitable that someday we would make a motion picture about trains. And naturally, it had to be the Great Locomotive Chase. For that old Civil War story, simply related as factual history, has all the elements of the wildest romance. An Atlanta newspaper of the time called it the most thrilling railroad adventure that has ever occurred on the American continent. We've tried to live up to that 1862 billing.
The screenplay, written by Larry Watkins, stayed fairly close to the historical record. Artistic license was taken in a few places. For example, the raiders couldn't set fire to the boxcar nor the bridge because they were rain-soaked. The roles of some of the military leaders were mixed up. The Georgia militia was too poor to afford uniforms. And Andrews never shakes Fuller's hand. And so on. Disney wasn't making a documentary, they were producing an action-adventure movie. Although both the General and the Texas survived to this day, they were not operable and could not be used for filming. Fess Parker, fresh off the success of Davy Crockett, was cast as James Andrews. He can explain from here.
A railroad roundhouse would seem a good place to go looking for a locomotive. And in the yards of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, we located the perfect actor for the part of the General. This was the William Mason, an actual Civil War locomotive 100 years old. Now retired, this proud old campaigner served during the 1860s in the vicinity of Harper's Ferry. We were lucky. We couldn't have found a better type to play the General. Across the continent, meanwhile, in the Union Pacific yards at Los Angeles, the old Inyo was being brought out of retirement for the role of the Texas. Here was another genuine old-timer, this one dating from the days of the Comstock Lode and the Nevada silver mines. Here we had an actor we felt we could count on. In fact, Walt Disney used it once before in his picture, so dear to my heart. Our search was over. This was the player to reenact the role of the Texas.
Here's another bit of artistic license. This is the real James Andrews. This is Fess Parker. James Andrews. Fess Parker. They'd hardly be mistaken for twins. Having found the steam-powered actors, the production now needed a place to run them. The Western and Atlantic Railroad, over which the actual chase took place, still exists. However, by 1955, it had been too modernized to pass for one from the Civil War. In another fortunate turn of events, the nearby Tallulah Falls Railway fit the bill, having changed little during the previous 90 years. This decrepit railroad was described by some locals as the total failure. Even with a great location, it wasn't practical to recreate full settings such as the Army camp or Washington, D.C. Disney legend Peter Ellenshaw was called upon to craft matte paintings on location. This allowed live action to be filmed through a clear area of the matte, but the rest of the frame was filled by whatever scene was required. In this case, the Confederate prison. The side angles and lighting for the time of day were perfectly married by Peter's amazing talent. The effect is convincing, and Peter created many such mats for other Disney productions, including Mary Poppins. He also performed other jobs during filming, including stoking a smudge pot for a smokestack that wasn't attached to any locomotive. Filming on location started in September 1955. You probably know that Disneyland had opened about 2 months prior, making it a very busy time for Walt Disney. Even though he did not spend much time on location for any production, curiously, Walt was present for several days in Georgia. I wonder why. Oh, that's why. The production was a boon to the local economy. Many area residents were hired as extras, some even providing their own wardrobe. Walt was often found in the shops and restaurants of small towns along the Tallulah Falls Railway's route. Even 70 years later, several of these businesses proudly display photographs of his visit. It wasn't just Walt, though. Several members of the cast spent time with the locals. Here, Jeff Hunter discusses his role, conductor William Fuller, with William Fuller II. Meanwhile, Fess was invited to the Kurtz residence, where he had supper with several generations of the Fuller and Kurtz families. Afterwards, William Fuller IV receives advice on how to wear a coonskin cap, how to load Old Betsy, and, I imagine, how to grow razor-sharp sideburns. The Great Locomotive Chase premiered in Atlanta on June 8, 1956. The Luz Grand Theater proudly announced that Walt and Fess would attend in person that night. Earlier that day, Walt has a Coke and a smile when he, Fess, and Jeff were featured in a parade riding aboard a rubber-wheeled miniature version of the Texas. A second premiere was held in Marietta, Georgia on June 17th. Not to be outdone by Luz, the Strand's premiere featured an accordion player. A special Midwestern premiere occurred that July 4th in Marceline, Missouri, where the Disney family lived 50 years prior. The Uptown Theater proclaimed that both Walt and Roy would participate in the celebration. There was no mention of an accordion player. The Disney brothers used this opportunity to revisit some of the locations from their childhood. We will go deeper into the story of Marceline and the importance it held in Walt's life in another episode. As you might expect, the film's release was accompanied by a few promotional items. These included a graphic novel that almost certainly would have been called a comic book at the time, 2 hardbound books, in addition to the usual lobby cards and movie posters. As was the studio's custom, they made a special letterhead promoting the film. There was even a The Great Locomotive Chase game and 3 different punch-out cardboard locomotives in special boxes of Cheerios. Some of these items, and far more artifacts from the Disney family, are on display at the Walt Disney Hometown Museum in Marceline.
Perhaps it was that the story figuratively runs out of steam when the general literally does the same. Or the ending, where the mission fails and the lead character has a short drop at sudden stop. Either way, the Great Locomotive Chase was a box office disappointment, earning only about $1.7 million on a budget of $2.5 million. Somehow, though, I doubt Walt considered it a failure.
In fact, at his office, Walt proudly displayed this lithograph of the general, presented to him by the movie's cast in December 1955. Guests fortunate enough to tour these restored offices today will see it right where he put it, above where visitors sat awaiting their meeting with Walt.
As Fess mentioned, the locomotives featured in the actual chase still exist.
The General is at the Southern Museum of Civil War and Locomotive History in Kennesaw, Georgia. The Texas is located at the Atlanta History Center. Their on-screen stand-ins are also on public display. The William Mason returned to the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, for whom it was built in 1856, and is housed in their spectacular museum. The Inyo, bought by the Virginia and Truckee Railroad in 1875, was owned by Paramount Pictures at the time the movie was made. It now calls the Nevada State Railroad Museum home, where it's actually fired up and operated a few times each year. Speaking of operation, throwing a running steam engine immediately into reverse makes for thrilling movies. It also creates incredible stress on the equipment. This close-up shows a crack on one of the Inyo's drive wheels due to this type of extreme usage. It's not easy to get replacement parts for 150-year-old locomotives. So, if you ever find yourself with your hand on the reversing lever of a historic steamer, as I sometimes do, please be gentle. In 2014, the Walt Disney Family Museum decided to celebrate the 145th anniversary of the Golden Spike ceremony by showing the Great Locomotive Chase for the month of May. They asked me to host a screening of the film and provide some details about the historic event and making of the movie. I recruited my friends Joel Fritchie, a retired Imagineering executive, and Harrison Ellenshaw, son of Peter Ellenshaw and a master matte artist in his own right, to help create the program. Joel's career at WDI included many train-related projects, such as the Disneyland Paris Railroad, the Hong Kong Disneyland Railroad, the Wildlife Express Railroad at Disney's Animal Kingdom, and the Red Car Trolley at DCA. However, it was his interest and expertise in the Civil War that made him the perfect partner in putting on this event. Most of the Andrews Raid information in this episode, especially what was historically accurate in the film and what had been, let's say, improved, came straight from Joel. Harrison provided many amazing behind-the-scenes images of and by his father at the film's shoot. Harrison's connection to this subject is a strong one. He shared with his father a love of model railroading. Imagine having an Oscar winner create the background images for your layout. The artistry that went into these landscapes is stunning. As a young lad, Harrison got to ride on Walt's Carrollwood Pacific Railroad on Christmas Day, 1953. Later, seen here with his mother Bobby, he got to experience Disneyland before opening day. He even got a ride on the Santa Fe and Disneyland Railroad before it was operational. This excursion was particularly special because it was aboard a flat car being propelled by Walt himself.
Beyond the film's promotional materials, there have been very few products created that celebrate Walt Disney's The Great Locomotive Chase.
In 2006, Heartland Locomotive Works made 50 G-gauge models of the General. You may recall Heartland being the company I selected to produce the first G-gauge model of Walt's Lilybell locomotive. What made their General extra special is that the cab of each was autographed by Fess Parker. A release party was held at his winery in Los Olivos, California on March 4th, 2007. During that event, Fess, seen here with my pal Ethan Aronson, recalled memories of Walt Disney and making the Great Locomotive Chase. In addition to crafting some great vino, the Fess Parker Winery is the only one I know that offers coonskin caps for their bottles.
To celebrate the 50th anniversary of the film's release, my friend Lowell Smith created this collectible train set kit for the Great Locomotive Chase. It includes miniatures of all the lobby cards associated with the film, N-scale versions of both the Texas and General locomotives, a collectible pin, because you gotta have a collectible pin, and a small version of the amazing art created by Jeff Granito. For those of you who are wondering why this particular size was selected, this is intended to be placed in the slip cover for the DVD of the movie. And if you're watching this in the future, you're probably thinking, what's a slipcase? What's a DVD? Isn't everything available everywhere you go all the time? And the answer is, well, back when we released this, the answer was no. You actually had to have physical discs to watch movies. It's interesting to consider how differently history might have turned out had James Andrews and his Raiders been successful in their daring attempt. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the Great Locomotive Chase, both the event and the Walt Disney film. If you'd like to learn more, William Pittenger's book in all three forms is still widely available. Daring and Suffering, Capturing a Locomotive, and of course, The Great Locomotive Chase. This particular copy autographed by Corporal Pittenger himself. Thank you to Michael Aronson, Harrison Ellenshaw, Joel Fritchie, Tom Morris, Lowell Smith, and others for their kind support of this episode. As always, thank you for joining me for another Once Upon a Train adventure. Until next time, happy rails.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this grand circle tour on Once Upon a Train. For your convenience, the like and subscribe buttons will remain open for at least one additional hour. Thank you.